biodiversity is one of those big ones, especially with the COP15 coming up later this year, followed by COP26, of course, focusing on climate. So I wanted to hear from you, and companies like Unilever and other food manufacturers and retailers, what can they do to help actually build rather than deplete biodiversity through their very products and supply chains?
I think a really important start point is that biodiversity will be driven in the end by more diverse consumption. Today, you all know it, but just 4 crops, wheat, rice, corn, potatoes, account for about 60% of the calories we all consume globally. So if we as big foods players don't change what people eat, we're not going to create a shift to the more diverse demand that the planet needs. So that's what we've also at Unilever been focusing on education. So last year, together with the WWF, we released the Knorr Future 50 Foods report. And that is a really interesting report that identifies 50 diverse foods that we should eat more of in order to increase biodiversity. If we want more diversity, more crop diversification, we need to eat more new foods. So at a very practical level, Knorr now offers swaps in its products and recipes. So things like using lentils instead of beef in a bolognese, or quinoa for rice in a curry, or sweet potatoes instead of potatoes.
I love that report because it really brings attention to what ingredients we're using in our products and bringing to market. How do we create these better offerings that are nutritious for people, that they're in line with dietary recommendations that we're seeing shifting around the world, and they're also good for nature and, of course, the farmers. So bringing together these pieces that I love seeing Unilever doing of what ingredients are being chosen and how those are being grown so that it's fit. We're designing products that are fit for a regenerative system. You're emphasizing the consumer, and what was coming to mind is the role of retailers, because while companies like Unilever and others create lots of products, they're not necessarily shaping those food environments. And I was just curious to see what your view is on the role of retailers and perhaps even how you'd like to see retailers and FMCGs working more collaboratively to be working towards these common goals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Retailers play a giant role in influencing what consumers eat. And, if we're going to transform the current food system, I believe there's kind of 2 big spaces. The first one is what we all eat, and the second is how we produce it. So we talked a lot today about how we produce it, regenerative agriculture practices, supporting rural livelihoods. But what we all eat is really up to many of us, including our important retailers. So the science is super clear on the fact that both people and planet will benefit from eating more plants, less meat, and less sugar, salts, fat, calories.
What reNature is doing is working both with the suppliers, the farmers, and also with companies ranging in sizes, including companies like Nespresso. And we think about the demand power, right, and the demand pull of major food companies, food manufacturing companies, retailers, etc., and the market that needs to be created as well to further incentivize economically the farmers to shift. So I'm curious just to hear as well from your perspective and conversations you've had with different companies you work with, like how are you seeing their approaches or momentum building within the corporate space around this?
No, that's a very interesting question, Emma. And indeed, like we have seen a lot of interest from the corporate world, like in looking into these practices and seeing how they can actually adopt inside their supply chain. So the first thing we see is that it's really important for them to realize how to shift is the willingness to transition. So if they are willing to learn about these techniques and willing to develop an MVP to start learning about the procedure. And then also a lot of companies that we're talking to, they have lack of traceability over their supply chain. So there is also a need of support in terms of like connecting directly with the farmers that supplies them.
It seems like that relationship with farmers is so critical, and just understanding, as you're describing, understanding if you undergo a regenerative transition, what are you actually producing afterwards, right? Because that relates to what ingredients are going into different products or grocery stores, et cetera. And from your perspective, how important or what changes would need to be made when it comes to, well, I'll call it buying models, contracts, anything that you see that, if done differently, could be really powerful from a company action standpoint to further accelerate this transition for suppliers and the farmers?
We have seen a lot of corporates, interested coming with offtake agreements, offering prices that are over the market to buy regenerative products. And this is something that, changed completely the scenario for the farmer, but also for investors that are interested, they have the ESG now in their portfolio and they want to invest in projects that has such an off-taker that offers a premium price. So, like we're looking at now farmers that are, very interested in this sort of in this sort of arrangement. And in this gives a lot of more motivation for farmers to adopt such practices. We are talking to a cooperative of 15,000 farmers in Brazil, in which they are not regenerative yet, but we are going to assist them to go through this transition. And by showing them these offtake agreements of 20% higher the market prices for the buying these products, they already show much more willingness to transition and to adopt such practices. So this kind of arrangements for having better prices really motivates farmers to go into that transition phase. So this is not only from a product perspective, but also from ecosystem services perspective. So talking about carbon, we see today, the average price paid for farmers to get these carbon credits is around $5 to $10 per ton. But we have got a pilot with Rabobank and Microsoft on carbon of $20 per ton of. So this gives farmers a lot of motivation to also say, hey, we can get even a better price for the carbon we actually sequestering in our own farm. So why not go into that? So better prices not only for products but also from the ecosystem services that they can actually benefit from, which is an additional income they never thought in their life they would see coming to their pockets. So for them has been a dream and has been a very benefit for their lives.
Oh, thanks, Felipe. You closed that out really well, so I'm gonna leave it there and say a big thank you to you for all the time and amazing perspective and examples that you've shared today.